think about a universal struggle that pretty much every single one of us faces on a daily basis. That sinking, persistent feeling that there's simply never, ever enough time.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You look at your to-do list, it is a mile long, you feel entirely overwhelmed, and yet somehow you still end up experiencing this bizarre guilt about procrastinating or, just not getting enough done. We are in this constant, exhausting battle against the clock.
It really is the defining anxiety of the modern age. I mean, we possess more time-saving technology, more efficiency hacks, and more productivity apps than any generation in human history, and yet...
we still feel completely starved for time.
Exactly. Culturally, we are hoarding minutes, but we are entirely losing the day.
That paradox is exactly why today's source material is so relevant to where we are right now. We are looking at a transcript from a really fascinating discipleship seminar focused on the use of time, and it's facilitated by Minister Tiffany Simmons. Now, the context here is overtly rooted in Christian theology, but the framework she presents goes far, far beyond just religious instruction.
It does. And just to set our mission for this deep dive, we're going to unpack the seminar impartially.
Yeah.
While the source material operates within a very specific religious context, our goal is to examine the practical frameworks and the incredibly vivid analogies the minister uses. We want to extract the underlying insights about intentionality, purpose, and the fundamental psychology of how we choose to spend our days.
Yeah, because regardless of your personal worldview, there is a profound psychological perspective here on what it means to truly steward your time rather than just manage it.
Beautifully said.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right out of the gate, she grounds this whole philosophy in a really simple but aggressive three-part framework called ACT.
ACT.
Exactly. Apply, change, and teach. The idea is that for any lesson to matter, you have to identify what you will apply to your life, what behaviors or mindsets you are actually willing to surrender and change, and crucially, what you're going to teach someone else.
From a purely behavioral standpoint, this is a brilliant framing device. It forces an immediate shift in the listener.
How so?
Well, you move from being a passive consumer of information, just sitting there listening to a lecture or a deep dive, to becoming an active participant by challenging you to identify a specific behavior to surrender and then requiring you to teach the concept to someone else. It builds an immediate friction and accountability.
Yeah.
You aren't just hearing about time management. You are being tasked with dismantling your current relationship with it.
But that change aspect, the surrendering a behavior part, that feels like the hardest part.
Oh, for sure.
The seminar talks about this concept of redeeming the time, which comes from the book of Ephesians. The minister explains this as actively reclaiming your time from distractions. She refers to the current era as evil days packed full of allurements. And honestly, when I think about our constant digital overload, the endless scrolling, the 24/7 news cycle...
The notifications always pinging.
Yes.
Yes.
It isn't hard to see those as allurements designed to pull us away from any meaningful use of our time.
What's fascinating here is the very specific distinction she makes between two different types of time to combat those allurements. She brings in two Greek words, Kronos and Kairos.
Kronos and Kairos.
Right. We are all deeply familiar with Kronos. Kronos is chronological time. It is clock-in time. It is the literal passing of the hour, the swiping of the ID badge, the rigid block schedule on your digital calendar.
But wait, we live in Kronos world. I mean, if I have a 9-to-5 job and meetings scheduled down to the minute, how am I supposed to operate outside of that?
The argument isn't that you ignore Kronos, but rather that true stewardship isn't about letting Kronos dictate your worth. It is about recognizing Kairos.
Okay, break down Kairos for me.
Kairos is described here as an allocated season or a specific assignment. It is the opportune moment. It is not about tracking the minute. It is about grasping the purpose of the moment. If you are entirely obsessed with Kronos, just checking boxes off a list to get through the hour, you completely miss the Kairos, the actual meaningful assignment you were meant to fulfill in that space.
That makes a lot of sense. You can perfectly optimize your Kronos, have the most efficient Tuesday ever, and still go to bed feeling completely unfulfilled because you missed the Kairos.
Exactly.
And that tension leads into one of the most interesting analogies in the transcript, drawing on the ancient story of Samson and Delilah.
Oh, this part is so good.
It is. So the Philistine leaders paid Delilah to uncover the source of Samson's immense strength. She entices him, discovers his secret, cuts his hair while he sleeps, and ultimately betrays him.
Simmons connects this ancient narrative to a very modern psychological trap. Delilah desired the benefit of Samson's power, but she didn't actually love him or want to honor him. The ministry uses this to illustrate how people, specifically believers in this context, often want the blessings or the power of God without being willing to put in the foundational work of a relationship or obedience.
It's wanting the prize without the process.
Yes.
If we take that out of a purely theological context, it feels incredibly applicable to modern ambition. It is like wanting the title of CEO, the corner office, and the massive salary, but having absolutely no desire to endure the grueling operational work, the 80-hour weeks, or the stress of managing a team.
That is the perfect secular equivalent. In the context of the seminar, the strict order of operations is that you have to seek the foundational relationship first, and only then will purpose and assignment follow. If you try to jump straight to the reward without committing to the values that actually create that purpose, you end up adrift. Delilah wanted the power without the devotion, and it led to destruction. When we seek the ultimate benefits of a purposeful life without doing the quiet, unglamorous work, we are falling into that exact same trap.
Which brings up a really big question of control. We often want to skip the process because we think we can engineer our own success on our own timeline.
Oh, the illusion of control.
Exactly. But the minister challenges that illusion head-on using a concept from James chapter 4. Human life is described there as a vapor or a mist. It appears for a little while and then just vanishes.
Yeah.
She shares this highly memorable anecdote about her grandfather, a man with only a third-grade education, who instinctively understood this. Every time he talked about his plans, he would always preface it by saying, "Lord will, I'm going to the store," or "Lord will, I'm going down home."
That anecdote carries so much weight because it gets right to the heart of what the source identifies as the sin of presumption.
Calling presumption a literal sin feels incredibly intense, especially when we live in a society that actively rewards us for having 5-year plans and color-coded daily itineraries. How does this framework reconcile the necessity of modern planning with the idea that presuming we have control is a sin?
It comes down to arrogance versus preparation. The seminar frames presumption, this unwavering assumption that we are guaranteed tomorrow or that we possess total authoritarian control over our schedules, as a fundamental failing. We build these elaborate itineraries for our lives, and we presume they will flawlessly unfold just because we put them in a spreadsheet.
Right, because I typed it in my calendar, it must be true.
Exactly. But the source isn't saying planning is bad. It is arguing that life involves complexities, variables, and powers far beyond human control. To plan as if your life is a fixed, immovable monument is foolish.
So it is about holding your plans loosely. You can have the color-coded calendar, but you have to mentally add that Lord will caveat to it.
Precisely. Any planning must be done with the humble recognition that our time is temporary, and the ultimate sovereignty over how our days unfold does not belong to our own willpower.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if we aren't supposed to rigidly control every chronological minute, and we have to accept that our plans might vanish like a vapor, what are we supposed to do with our days?
Right. What's the alternative?
The seminar answers this by diving deeply into the concept of seasons, drawing from that famous passage in Ecclesiastes. To everything there is a season. The minister outlines several distinct seasons a person might be navigating. There is the learning season, and she points to Moses being educated in Egypt. There is the serving season, like the Apostle Paul dedicating years of his life to building churches. There is the preparation season, using the example of David quietly tending sheep long before he ever saw a throne. And finally, there's the rest season.
We really need to linger on that rest season, because the text spends a lot of emotional energy there. Simmons offers a very personal, very vulnerable confession about her own life. She talks about how she used to operate with what she calls an automated yes.
The automated
Yes. Before she even thought about it, before she considered her own capacity or consulted her faith, if someone asked her to do something, she just automatically agreed. Yes to teaching, yes to leading a committee, yes to helping a friend move.
I think so many people listening right now can deeply relate to that automated yes. It usually comes from a good place, a desire to be helpful, or a fear of letting people down. But the minister points out that the result of her automated yes was complete burnout and self-neglect. There is a striking quote from this section that just stopped me in my tracks. She says, "Busyness is not a badge of honor. Busyness is a distraction."
That is a deeply countercultural statement. We tend to equate being constantly busy with being important, valuable, or in demand. But the underlying psychology here suggests that if your busyness is pulling you away from the specific assignment you are supposed to be focused on in your current season, then it isn't productive at all. It is literally a distraction orchestrated to keep you from your true purpose.
But it is so hard to say no when a door opens. We are conditioned to believe that every open door is an opportunity we have to walk through.
Right.
The minister explicitly notes, however, that not every opportunity is your assignment. Let that sink in. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you are supposed to.
And that requires a terrifying amount of discernment. If you are in a season of preparation, like the David example, your job is to quietly tend the sheep in the background. It is not to try and rush the throne or take on a leadership role you aren't ready for. The text actually compares acting outside of your designated season to a slipped disc in your spine. You are out of alignment, you are out of order, and the inevitable result is just pain and immense pressure.
So we have this massive danger of being overly busy with the wrong things. But the seminar immediately pivots to warn about the exact opposite extreme, which is equally destructive: idleness.
Yes, the pendulum swings both ways.
It transitions into a discussion on time wasters, procrastination, unnecessary commitments, and of course the modern giant, social media. Scrolling is described as a place of fake fulfillment. It is a space we retreat to when we don't want to think, but it offers absolutely no real nourishment. It is what the biblical text refers to as the bread of idleness.
To really drive this concept home, the minister introduces what is arguably the most vivid and convicting analogy in the entire transcript: the idle vehicle. Think about a car that is turned on, the engine is running, but it is just sitting parked in the driveway. The seminar breaks down 4 distinct compounding dangers of an idle vehicle. First, an idle car is burning fuel, but it is making absolutely no progress. In the context of our lives, time and energy are the fuel. You are spending them, they are draining away, but you aren't moving an inch toward your purpose.
You are entirely stagnant, but your resources are still depleting. That is a bleak realization.
It gets worse. The second danger is that an idle vehicle wears down the engine. Even though the car isn't moving, the internal machinery is still working, still generating heat and friction. This perfectly captures that modern phenomenon where you spend an entire weekend doing absolutely nothing, just doom scrolling or binge watching television, and somehow you wake up on Monday morning feeling completely, utterly exhausted.
Wow. The engine was running, the underlying anxiety was humming in the background the entire time, but you went nowhere. You get all the wear and tear of driving with none of the scenery. What is the third danger?
The third is that an idle car produces unnecessary exhaust and pollution. Simmons ingeniously links this exhaust to idle talk, gossip, and being a busybody.
I want to pause on that because the psychology there is fascinating. Gossip as the exhaust of an idle life. Why does that happen?
When people lack forward momentum or meaningful purpose in their own lives, they still have a psychological need to feel movement. So they generate this toxic exhaust by hyperfixating on the business, the drama, and the movements of others. If you aren't driving your own car, you sit in the driveway and critique how everyone else is driving theirs.
That is brilliant. It makes so much sense. And the fourth danger of the idle vehicle.
Vulnerability. A running car left sitting unattended is a massive, glowing target for theft.
And the seminar uses a huge historical example to illustrate this specific vulnerability: the story of King David and Bathsheba. This infamous moral failing didn't happen because David was out seeking destruction. It happened specifically because he was idle. The scripture notes that it was the season when kings go out to battle, but David chose to stay behind in Jerusalem. He abandoned his Kairos.
Exactly.
He abandoned his assignment. And because he was idle, just wandering around his roof instead of being where he was supposed to be, he was entirely exposed to temptation, which led to a catastrophic series of decisions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying argument is that idleness is never just taking a harmless break. In this framework, idleness is an active state of vulnerability. It is a deliberate stepping away from your life's purpose that leaves your doors unlocked. It exposes you to distraction, to negative habits, and to forces that actively steal your potential. We have to differentiate this from the rest season we talked about earlier. True rest is purposeful, restorative, and necessary. Idleness is just running the engine without a driver.
So if we know the crushing weight of the automated yes, and we see the profound risks of becoming an idle vehicle, where does this seminar ultimately leave us? It concludes with a very intense, very visceral call to urgency. The minister quotes a guest pastor from her church, Ed Stitzer, who delivered this incredible line. He said that believers are not meant to just pay, pray, and stay out of the way.
That is a sharp, necessary critique of complacency. The overarching message of the conclusion is that truly understanding the nature of time should trigger a massive shift from passive existence to active obedience. The text references the scripture warning that the night is far spent. It acts as an alarm bell. It is telling the listener that life is moving rapidly toward a destination, the fuel in the tank is finite, and there is absolutely no time left to be asleep at the wheel.
So what does this all mean? We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We started with the friction of the ACT framework, forcing ourselves to apply, change, and teach. We looked at the profound difference between Kronos, which is just obsessively clocking the minutes, and Kairos, which is recognizing your appointed assignment in the moment.
Yes.
We explored the wisdom of discerning our seasons, whether we are meant to be learning, serving, preparing, or resting. And we unpacked that incredibly stark warning about the idle vehicle, burning precious fuel, wearing down our engines, creating toxic exhaust, and leaving ourselves vulnerable to theft.
What it ultimately means is that, according to this framework, time management is not merely a secular corporate buzzword about squeezing more productivity out of an 8-hour workday. Managing your time is framed here as a profound act of stewardship. Time is a finite resource you've been granted, and you bear the responsibility for how it is utilized. We often celebrate unplanned, empty time as a victory, but the seminar warns that without wisdom and intentionality, unplanned time is very often simply wasted time.
It is about moving through your day with a deliberate sense of alignment. You are either steering the vehicle or you are just letting the hours happen to you while the engine runs hot.
And so, we want to turn this directly back to you, the listener. Regardless of your personal theology or beliefs, these psychological frameworks are incredibly challenging. Take a hard, honest look at your own life this week. Are you currently operating like that idle vehicle?
Good question.
Are you burning through your days, feeling completely exhausted by the mental load, but making zero actual progress toward the things that matter to you? Or perhaps you are suffering from the automated yes. Are you holding on to commitments out of a false sense of duty, a fear of missing out, or a desire to look important, even though those very commitments are actively distracting you from your true season?
Remember the C in the ACT acronym from the very beginning of the deep dives. What is one specific behavior, one mindset, or one distraction regarding your time that you need to surrender this week? Is it the doom scrolling that gives you fake fulfillment? Is it the presumption that you have endless tomorrows to finally start that project or repair that relationship? Whatever it is, identify it and make the active choice to change it.
It requires significant amount of courage to look at your daily schedule, point to certain activities, and admit that they are just the bread of idleness. But recognizing that truth is the vital first step toward reclaiming your Kairos.
It really is. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that builds on this entire conversation.
Yeah.
We live in a society that is constantly, relentlessly pushing us to optimize our chronos. We download apps to shave 30 seconds off our tasks. We listen to audiobooks on double speed. We try to squeeze just one more email into the literal hours of the day. But what if true mastery of time has absolutely nothing to do with Kronos and is entirely about Kairos?
That is the ultimate paradigm shift, moving from efficiency to effectiveness.
Consider this. If you take a step back, honestly evaluate your life, and realize that you are currently meant to be in a designated season of rest, as the seminar described, what if the most urgent, the most purposeful, and the most profoundly productive thing you could possibly do tomorrow is absolutely nothing?
For a culture obsessed with movement, that is a terrifying thought. But perhaps it is the most necessary one we could entertain.
It's something to think about the next time you feel the urge to add just one more thing to your to-do list. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.
Until next time.